Michelle Osorio. She's an investment director at, is it Kawi? Kawi Safi Ventures, an Africa-focused climate VC fund. Michelle has been in impact investing since 2001 when she worked for SJF Ventures' first fund, also focused on addressing the challenges of climate change and poverty while creating financial returns. Thanks, Michelle.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here at the end of the day on the second day. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm Michelle Osorio from Kawi Safi Ventures. Thank you for the introduction. We're an impact VC fund focused on the just energy transition in Africa. I want to thank the organizers for having me here today. It's been a really full 2 days with many exciting climate solutions. So I'm pleased to be here and share some of our work impacting people and planet with a focus on Africa. So Kawi Safi Ventures is a leading African climate investment platform. Our team is based in Nairobi, Kenya, led by our managing director, Amar Inamdar. The fund was originally launched by Acumen Fund, which is based here in New York City, based on their long history of investing patient capital in early-stage companies working to benefit people living in poverty. Kawi Safi was launched in 2016 as Acumen's first for-profit fund with a focus on distributed renewable energy. There are now 4 Acumen-sponsored for-profit funds operating in Latin America, Africa, and South Asia across energy, agriculture, and other segments. So Kawi Safi invests equity in late venture stage companies and actively supports rapidly scaling businesses. We focus specifically on businesses that have achieved product market fit, that have revenues of at least $1 million, and need capital to scale their solutions. We are a hands-on investor and take board seats in an active role. Our investments have leveraged over $500 million in additional debt and equity capital into our companies. They have an average revenue CAGR of 70% since the time of our investment. And with that growth, they have positively impacted 100 million lives and averted 25 million tons of CO2. As everyone in this room agrees, climate change is the greatest risk facing humanity. With that, the poorest people will be the most severely impacted, and they have contributed least to the problem. It's worth pausing here to frame the context of why climate solutions for Africa are essential for global climate goals. It's easier to focus on larger markets where we are transitioning existing polluting infrastructure into more sustainable solutions. By contrast, African economies are growing rapidly. And as they grow, they need to build new systems that will be sustainable. So we are building access to power and the essential services to enable green growth. There are some statistics here on the slide that are worth highlighting. So the poorest people will be the hardest impacted by climate change. An estimated 15% GDP growth on the continent will be wiped out by climate change by 2030, and 100 million people pushed deeper into poverty. Africa today contributes only 3% to greenhouse gases because people don't have access to essential needs like electricity. Approximately 600 million people lack access to power. One American family, on average, uses as much electricity as 100 Ethiopian families in a year. And the vast majority of African firms experience outages and unreliable power regularly. So we cannot assume that Africa will remain underdeveloped in order to achieve global climate goals. Instead, inclusive economic growth is fundamental for Africa. Without low-carbon technologies, this growth will derail global climate solutions, or global climate ambitions. The continent's economy is projected to double in size as population and incomes grow, and energy use is expected to go 3 times in the next 20 years. So implementing sustainable solutions today will drive that economic growth and do it in a low-carbon, sustainable manner. The great news is that the technology and solutions exist. In our existing investments and forward-looking pipeline, there are compelling businesses that apply proven technology and new ways to open broad markets to affordable solutions. This is not charity. This is over $1 billion in equity investment opportunities into rapidly scaling companies. We are really excited about the distributed energy and climate technology landscape across Africa. To highlight some specific examples of what this looks like, here's our Fund 1 portfolio of 10 companies. So these are the companies we've invested in since we've been active since 2016. These can be segmented into residential energy, commercial and industrial solutions, and the enabling services and technology. So I'll touch quickly on one example from each of those categories. In residential solar, D-Light is now a household name in the energy access sector. They create solar home systems, which are appliance-scale solar units that can be self-mounted and power several light bulbs, charge a cell phone, or can scale up for larger uses like TV and refrigerators. They're financed by micropayments, making them affordable and effective for people living at the bottom of the pyramid. The climate impacts are significant as they displace kerosene for home lighting. In C&I solutions, one of our exciting recent investments is Sistema Bio, a biodigester company that converts livestock waste into gas for on-farm uses, including heating water for sanitation. Sistema Bio has installed over 50,000 biodigesters to date in small to mid-sized farms. Last year, they announced their largest carbon program in Uganda, the Uganda Dairy Biogas Program, to benefit small and medium dairy farms across the country. It's expected to avoid over 1.5 million tons of carbon emissions over the project's life. And in the enabling technologies category, I will highlight, we're investing across financing, software, and manufacturing to date. So Angaza is a SaaS company that provides the Paygo software to enable the micropayments that I referred to earlier. They've doubled their ARR since our time of investment and now service over 4 million user accounts. They're able to use the credit data from the Paygo systems to help clients improve their credit performance. Looking forward, we see the distributed energy landscape continuing to mature and evolve, with exciting opportunities across a range of technologies and services. We segment these into 4 pillars as shown here. So energy transition, this is the core distributed renewable energy strategy and all the related technologies to support it. So power as a service, diesel generator replacement, battery storage, for example. Productivity captures the ways to use energy for livelihoods as well as sustainable solutions that are driving economic growth. So some of these include cold chain solutions, the agriculture energy nexus, green manufacturing. Mobility and logistics. So electric mobility has exploded in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly for two-wheelers. And there are a host of technologies surrounding that, as well as the potential to use IoT to improve efficiency in logistics and distribution. And nature-based solutions are more of an emerging segment today with clear growth ahead, which we are excited to be part of. So we embed impact and ESG across our investment process from sourcing through to exits. We report on impact metrics alongside our financial reporting and conduct upfront and annual ESG assessments for all of our portfolio companies. This is just core for us and part of how we invest. And a quick snapshot of our impact targets for, for our funds, including a few of the standards that we align to. And I want to close by emphasizing that climate change is global, considering both the catastrophic impacts of climate change on the poorest people who are least able to respond to it, and the potential for vast economic growth that could be fueled by highly polluting resources. There is a pressing imperative and opportunity to build sustainable solutions in the emerging markets. There are excellent companies in Africa leading the way with affordable, climate-positive products and services, and could be strong partners and clients for many of your firms. I'd love to engage further and hope to find ways to work together to bring climate solutions to Africa. Thank you.
I have one. How do you find projects to finance?
Yeah, so our team's on the ground in Kenya and just part of the sort of local entrepreneurial ecosystem there. So we're very actively sourcing through our network and relationships. There's a number of conferences around these sectors that we participate in. So it's a evolving ecosystem, but quite an active one.
I just want to, I'm David Kirkpatrick, I'm a journalist. I just first applaud you. The thesis and the point of those slides is so central to the fundamental global challenge, and it's not often enough discussed, particularly in the United States. But I was curious, given that, and I really do believe that, how would you characterize the state of capital availability for that transition, given the experience you guys are having running that fund? Are there other similar funds? is this the movement that it needs to be, or assuming that's got to be no, how far away are we from having that movement we must have to enable this sustainable transition in the developing world?
Yeah, thank you for the perspective and for the question. I think it's hard. It's a harder, I think, for one, in the U.S. context, I think most investors are not really accustomed to thinking about Africa as an investment destination, and I think we come in with a lot of perceptions about the risks that might exist there. So I do think there's certainly an educational role in understanding really the diversity of opportunities and risks across the continent. I think today, a lot of these investments are fueled by, on the one side, impact investors who come in, as part of their allocations, including impact as an important component, the development finance institutions, and we're really aiming to bring in like a broader group of supporters into our next fund, and really see that as part of our mission to prove that, when done responsibly, done well, done with commercial discipline, that these can be really sound investments. So it's something we take seriously, but it's still, I think, a bit of a uphill climb.
On the next fund, how would you invest? What's the minimum? Is it institutional only? What's the size of your fund? And is it evergreen or 5-10 year hold? If you can go into how to participate.
Yeah, thank you. Our first fund, we're coming toward the end of our investment period, so we'll do one new investment in that fund. It's a just under $70 million vehicle. So we're investing 2 to 5 million tickets in companies in Series A and B stages predominantly, with a bit of flexibility around that. So we're typically co-investing with others in sort of significant minority stakes. And we're starting to build toward our fund 2, which we're never allowed to talk about publicly, so we'd be happy to chat further about that. But we really do like to co-invest with others. It's really a collaborative space in terms of the investors that we like to work with.
I want to say thanks for that presentation. It's a certainly an important one to me, and I appreciate them on behalf of the Wall Street's Green Summit. One of the paradoxes that puzzles me is that Africa has one of the youngest populations, in addition to the other factors that you mentioned. And I'm not quite sure why the values still escape investors. I know China has become very interested in that part of the country. They're very interested in the Caribbean. In Antigua, the island where I'm from, they've set up a huge headquarters, and I'm still wondering what's going to be going on there. But we're in a global world, and there is competition. Other people are looking. Any insights into why there's still a certain amount of blindness?
I think it's a big question, so not a lot of easy answers, I don't think. I would say that the capital cycle is still slower, typically, in Africa than in other regions. And so we're trying to be part of the flywheel that gets that moving, right? So if we can bring these companies through the full capital cycle from investment to exit, then there are more demonstrated track records, and it's easier to show performance and become a more predictable investment destination. But there are absolutely longstanding private equity and VC investors in Africa doing extraordinarily well. So the examples are there. I just think it's still a region that many American investors aren't familiar to thinking about. So the more we can build the track record and examples, I think hopefully that will start to change over time. But thank you.
Yes, Philip Rose from Energy Intelligence. I would have a macro question. There are basically two schools of thoughts about the transition. Energy in Africa. One says they're going to leapfrog centralized grids, fossil fuels, etc. And the other one where, and surprisingly, you find the oil industry insists a lot about energy poverty and that they need fossil fuels, they need ICE cars. So what's your view on that? And just a clarification by Africa, I assume you mostly mean sub-Saharan Africa, or are you also looking at North Africa?
So I'll start with that one because it's shorter. But our first fund is very East Africa focused, and we're building into more of a sub-Saharan Africa focus. The portfolio is kind of already in that direction. They're mostly regional companies. On the first point, I think, so we think of it more under the lens of there are the infrastructure scale projects, and they're essential. And they're not meeting the full need of the population, and there's a lot of Africa that still is not connected to the grid and won't be, only because extending that grid is not, it's just extremely expensive, and there's not really a time frame for doing it that's anytime soon. So the distributed technologies, what's amazing is that the technologies have come to the point where they really are meeting the need kind of across a range of use cases, from these small systems that I mentioned up through much larger CNI applications. And then you have, the remote monitoring and control systems that allow that to really be scalable. So really looking at, I think, both of those existing in parallel. We're clearly focused more on the company building distributed side versus the infrastructure side, but both are needed.
And what about transport electrification? It's hugely challenging in Africa.
So right now, what we're really seeing is a surge on the two-wheeler side, which is a really important segment, and the numbers are fantastic, just in terms of, it just makes sense from an economic basis to convert to electric. So you have today a lot of companies that are having to do everything, so they're building the bikes, they're building the battery infrastructure, they're building the financing solutions. We expect to see that start differentiating over time, and also starting to see some exciting movement around kind of last mile logistics and delivery. But clearly, it's a big system as is here, and will take, multiple solutions required across the value chain. Thank you.
How do you work with development finance institutions if you do, and how do you work with non-export related currency risk?
So on the DFIs, they're very active in the space, both as investors into funds like ours, as well as direct investors into many of the companies that we work with, both on the equity side as well as the debt side. So many of them are present. A lot of them have been for a long time and are really important parts of supporting the sector, I would say. On currency, it's mostly managed at our company levels. So they're essentially sourcing product in China, bringing it into region, selling based on local markets. So they're kind of, I think, continuously assessing the sort of landed product cost and how that they're able to cover that through the payment cycle with clients. So far, I think they've been able, again, kind of based on the way that the repayment cycles work, it's something that they're kind of actively managing versus thinking about hedging solutions or anything complex like that. Thank you.
Thank you.